Hi, everybody. Hello, JCI Michigan. I'm Kimmy Tolliver. I am your 2020 training director, and I wanted to welcome you to the spring edition of JCI Talks. This is a little bit unprecedented because, as you can see, we're doing it over video because of the COVID-19 crisis, and I hope everybody is doing well and everybody is safe and happy. This particular JCI Talks is very personal to me. It's about comparison and what that does to you when you either fight it or you let it succumb to you. I think all of us can probably think of a time when we let comparing our situation to someone else's stop us, or in some cases, maybe even help us flourish. So I thought it might be appropriate, and I won't use the word fun, that seemed a little much, but I thought it would be appropriate as young professionals and people who want to do good in this world to talk kind of about how you can overcome the comparison trap. So sit back, relax, and join us for the next 5 speakers. Our next speaker is a graduate of Vincent University with a BS in Homeland Security and Associates of Science in Paralegal Studies. She finds joy in volunteering at the local community shelter and giving back to her community. She is passionate about human rights and sits on multiple boards to combat inequality. She has been a member of JCI since 2018, and she is currently a director on her local board and a production team member on the JCI Michigan board. Everybody, please welcome Arianna King.
Hi, JCI Michigan. My name is Arianna King, and I am so excited to share my story with you. When Training Director Kimmy told me what the topic was for JCI Talks, I hesitated to jump on board. After contemplating, I decided to share my story with hopes it would help someone. So let me provide some background about myself. I was raised in Chicago, Illinois, with my grandmother and my mom. In 1999, at the age of 32, my mother passed from type 1 diabetes. However, before her passing, my mother accomplished her doctoral in health administration. She spoke 4 different languages. She wrote articles for magazines. She traveled around the world for the government, and she was the director for a federal agency. She left huge shoes to fill, and it was very hard to fill those shoes. So here's where the comparison came in. As I started my path to becoming an adult, I was reminded of the benchmarks my mom hit by just the age of 25. When I was not as accomplished as my mother, I was reminded constantly how my mother spoke multiple languages and rubbed shoulders on Capitol Hill and on and on and on. So when I accomplished anything like becoming student president at my college or simply passing a super hard law class with a B, I was reminded that I could do better because my mom passed the exact same class with an A. What should have been praises became things that hurt me. I felt like I could not do anything good enough for my family. I would find myself defeated, and I seriously just wanted to give up. One day during my senior year of undergrad, I realized it was okay to be different. It was okay to create my own path, and it was okay to fail. And fail again, and fail again, and maybe again, no judgment, until you succeed. It's okay not to be my mother. It's okay to struggle and fail and figure it all out. And then my thing was everyone else would just have to fall in line. Once I was done with undergrad, I decided to not move back home. I had to find my own path. I had to create Arianna's story. I could not fill my mother's shoes, and I couldn't finish her story that unfortunately she was not able to finish. So moving to Michigan was the best thing I could have done for myself. Yes, I struggled. I didn't have family around me. I didn't have the things that were easily accessible if I would have moved back home to Illinois. But it felt so amazing when I started accomplishing things, without extra help. I stepped out of my comfort zone and I broke down barriers that some people may have not been able to do so. Please understand, I'm very proud of who my mother was and the things that she accomplished, but I'm even more proud of myself. I used my mother's accomplishments to push me to become someone she would be proud of. Now, all the friendly reminders that everyone likes to bring up, I will allow it to be my motivation to continue to grow and accomplish my goals. One of my favorite quotes is by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he stated, "The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." It's so powerful, and that quote means so much to me. Friends, do not allow anyone to discredit your value because you matter. Your accomplishments matter, however long it takes you to become the best you. Whatever that is, do it for you. You are here to make your own mark on this world. Be kind to yourself. Always encourage yourself. Be the best you, and do it with purpose. You have the key to your own success. Thank you all.
Our next speaker is Ohio-born and has been a member of JCI Michigan for more than 10 years, with JCI Greater Flint being home chapter. Throughout his JCI career, he has chaired many projects and events, as well as held a number of board positions on local and state boards. He is currently a member of the 2020 Communications and Technology team for JCI Michigan, is internal vice president for JCI Greater Flint. When he is not doing things with JCs, he enjoys taking care of his lawn, gardening, timing track and cross-country meets, and spending time with his partner in life, Aaron Verberkemos, also from JCI Greater Flint and Petoskey area, and spending time with their two children, Maggie and Theo. Please welcome James Dreher.
Good afternoon, and yes, I'm Rose's brother. Growing up in a small farming community with an uncommon last name, there were many assumptions, along with many well-rehearsed responses and explanations that were part of life. A lot of those comparisons were based on so-and-so didn't do this, and so-and-so weren't involved with that. Comparisons based on assumptions. While one way of reacting to these comparisons would be to simply fall in line, another would be to give up and shut yourself off. Yet another reaction is to rise up and accept these outside comparisons as challenges to make your own way. While some family members also took art, I focused on it. I have a degree in photographic technology, specializing in portraiture, with additional work in graphic design. While other members of the family would appear on stage, I preferred to be in the orchestra pit. I used comparisons to family members in drama and choir to focus on instrumental music. Now, while I couldn't play basketball, being uncoordinated as the day is long, I still sported. I focused on track and cross country, running anywhere from 800 meters through the 2,000 meter steeplechase, and very begrudgingly the 3,200 meters, earning honors at all. But unlike my older sister, I learned that I can't start out of the blocks. And quite frankly, I swim like a rock. In psychology, the concept is called social comparison theory, the innate tendency of humans to self-evaluate, often by comparing themselves to others. This self-evaluation can lead to both positive and negative outcomes. Based on this, it could be said I used comparisons that others made about me and turned them into ways to thrive and to create my own niche. And of course, within the JCs, we use these comparisons all the time when evaluating our chapters and programming, usually one of two ways. First, upward social comparison, comparing ourselves to those who we believe are better than us. And downward social comparison, comparing ourselves with those that we believe are worse off. let's face it, a lot of us had sat through that chapter planning meeting, spitballing project ideas based on, wouldn't it be nice if we did blank like so-and-so does? Or my particular favorite, we need another signature project because blank has two. This is a prime example of upward social comparison. While this kind of comparison can be, on the whole, positive, it takes positive actions and positive reinforcement to achieve the desired goal to be like the Joneses. One has to stay positive throughout the process, despite any setbacks that might occur. Otherwise, trying too much to be like the Joneses may lead to burnout, furthering a sense of not being as good as others. Then there's the downside of social comparison, one of which that we're probably all guilty. This one is the one that usually manifests itself as, well, at least we're not, with this kind, it's okay to stay the course. What you're doing works. Great job. Except it doesn't. Making this type of comparison at times fails to take notice of the reasons why others might not be as well off, learning from their mistakes. Or just by making the comparison that you're doing better, feeling that that is good enough, progress stops. Always ask why. And be better. While this tagline has been around for a while in JCI, it's one that feels hard to use. Again, comparisons at work. By challenging our members to improve their lives by building leadership and personal skills, by bettering our communities through coordinated efforts of our membership, and bettering the organization by constantly moving and innovating, we have to look at ourselves and determine what type of comparison are we going to make. As Theodore Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy. In some instances, he was right. When we hold ourselves up to too high of a standard or falter at a pursuit of a goal, doing what others do, trying to be better rings hollow. By comparing ourselves to those worse off, we are robbing ourselves of the joy of working harder to achieve more. By striving to be among the best chapters, we risk the pain of not reaching our goals. By comparing how one leader works compares to another, you rob one of the ability to lead. And I know I have felt that. It's one thing to hold yourself and others to higher standards, but using comparisons to tear others down is another thing completely. We're all afforded 1 year to lead. Each year is different. Just be mindful of what others are going through. And don't compare one year to another or one leadership style to another. It takes all types. So before jumping to conclusions, take time to learn why others are striving to reach higher goals. When they're making changes, learn why. And by all means, do not utter the most dangerous phrase in the JCs, but it's always been done that way.
Our next speaker has been a JC for 5 years, and during that time, he has helped perfect events such as loggers and lunches to help benefit school children. He also has created a financial literacy series to help those of us who need help in how to manage our finances. He is also passionate about the world of finance and his dog, Cash. Everyone, please welcome Christopher Crawford.
Hello, JCI Michigan. My name is Chris Crawford, and today I'd like to talk to you about comparison and how I've been able to use comparison to motivate myself in my life. I'd like to start with an example, probably one of my earliest examples of comparing myself to another person and using that to motivate myself, to elevate myself higher than I ever thought it was possible. Growing up, I always played, little league baseball. non-contact football, like flag football, stuff like that. Parents didn't really want me involved in contact sports per se. And so freshman year of high school, coach came and recruited me out of the 8th grade and said, "You're playing football," which was great. In Garden City, I actually was one of the bigger kids on the freshman team. So that was fun. I went from being third string to first string pretty quickly. However, going into my sophomore season, we moved, and I moved to Inkster. I was attending Robichaud High School. Suddenly, I was not the biggest guy, one of the bigger guys on the team. In fact, I was one of the smallest guys on the team. One of the shortest guys, and one of the smaller weight wise as well. Not as strong. Like I could put the bar up with a couple 45s, about 135. That's about what I was doing going into my sophomore season. We had a kid. His name was Otis Smith, that everybody looked up to. He was probably the best football player that we had. That had a stature similar to myself. We had a really tall guy at quarterback, a couple of things. But what he did is he played defensive end, he played fullback, he played linebacker, and he played lineman. He was a really big guy. He could play both ways of the ball. And Otis, the big thing that stood out about him is aside from the fact that he was huge, he had a bench press of 350 pounds. He had a squat of about 450. And he had a great football IQ. All that translates to the fact is the guy he was in the newspaper every week, and college recruiters were coming to look at him, and they were offering him scholarships, which I always thought was really cool. I always saw myself as more of an academic guy, and did not see myself as somebody that had the ability to get athletic scholarship offers or anything like that. And after having a football season of him kicking my butt, I ended up on the ground pretty much 5 times a practice minimum when I had to go heads up against him. And towards the end of the season, I was really doubting myself, and it's just like, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I need to stick to honor society and some other things like that. And I had a coach come up to me, Coach Abdullah, and he said, you have one thing that's not coachable. I said, what's that? He said, you have heart. No matter how many times you get your ass kicked, you get back up. And the other guys are not getting back up against him. He's like, I can teach you how to get stronger, but you got to work. So we broke down everything that Otis was able to do. He was on the track team. I broke down what his stats for track were, what his stats for bench press were, what his stats for curling was, what everything, every measurable thing you could think of. In terms of GPA and grades, I had him on that. So that really wasn't an issue in terms of grades or test scores. But I wanted to be better than Otis. And I didn't think it was really possible, but I said I would give it a try. He'd been playing football since he was 5. So every day before school, I would meet Coach Abdullah. We would do a workout. I'd go to classes, do all my classes. I would try to eat as healthy as possible. And then I would go to actual football practice or actual weight training practice afterward. And while everybody else is kind of laughing and joking, playing music and, working out, but not really working out, I just stayed to myself laser focused. And I would say, all right, when I first started out, my bench press was literally 135. Ugh. And then I would keep working, and then 2 days would go past, and I would add to it. And then another week, I would add to it. And I would keep working and keep working, keep working. 6 months later, I didn't know what a protein shake was. I didn't know what a multivitamin was. Definitely no supplementation. Just my mom's Southern cooking, eating the garbage McDonald's food that I had from work because I worked at McDonald's, and just working hard and grinding and just being determined that I was going to be stronger than him. We had our pound club, and I threw up 455 pounds on the bench press, unassisted. And I did over 600 pounds squatting, unassisted. I've never been a distance runner. But I was actually undefeated in the 4x100 relay. And placed well in shot and disc as well. And number one on my tennis team, just because I was determined that, because Otis also played tennis, is just determined to be the best by comparing myself to the best and making sure that I'm always working a little bit harder, doing a little bit more, pushing myself a little bit further. And not just with sports and school, that's just how I've lived my life. Whenever I come into a job, if I want to be the best at a job, I figure out who the best person is at my position. Most recently, before I was promoted at Fidelity, I found out who the highest performing investment consultant was in the country for Fidelity. And I reached out to him, asked him some questions, and within a year and a half, I was the highest producing and was promoted, and now I'm working on the next thing. So comparison can be a good thing. It can motivate you to help you achieve your dreams, and that's what motivates me. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.
Have you ever just needed a hug? And not just any hug. You need the hug. Well, our next speaker is the person who will give you the hug. Not only is she an exceptional hugger, she is also kind, she is compassionate, she is patient, and she is strong. I'm really excited for you guys to hear what she's prepared for you today. It's amazing. And at the end, we'll all want a hug. Our next speaker, Jessica Bocade.
Hi friends, my name is Jessica Bocade, and today we're talking about the comparison trap. It's a topic that I feel very strongly about and that I've struggled with for a long time. But truthfully, once all human contact was put on hold this year, I didn't want to do this JCI talk. I felt like it wasn't important anymore for me to tell you about how the comparison trap caught me. Because in comparing myself to others, I felt like I had too much to be grateful for, that I should keep my mouth shut. That because there were good things, the struggles didn't matter. Because look how much harder that person has it. And look at their challenges. I questioned if my story was worthy enough to be heard. But maybe in sharing, I can help somebody else. I have been caught in the comparison trap so many times I've lost count. As an undergrad at Western, one of my acting professors called it compare and despair. And that was a moment of realization for me because I finally understood that I'd been doing it my entire life. I've always compared myself next to others. It's not so much a trap, but more of a constant cycle for me. It's still something that I struggle with today. Some days it is so easy to feel that confidence in myself, to feel empowered. And other days I see what others have done and gained and accomplished, and I feel small and stupid, like my accomplishments aren't worth anything. Comparison has cost me a lot of happiness, a lot of restful evenings, and it leaves me struggling to find self-worth sometimes. Because over time, that comparison to others evolved into toxic negative self-talk that played on a loop in my head. Not pretty enough, not funny enough, not smart enough, not thin enough, not creative enough, not clever enough, not whatever enough, just on and on and on. And I let that loop play for so long in my head that I started to believe it was the truth. And I believed it for a long time, for much longer than I should have. Every accomplishment had a qualifier, a flaw. It was good, but this went well, but hindsight and self-doubt were right next to me in every step I made and overshadowed every action that I took, as if I could magically go back in time and change the outcome. And because of this comparison cycle, the inability to see my own value, I struggle with self-worth all the time. And I got to a point where I knew that the cycle was not one that I could break by myself. So I saw a counselor. And before I talk about that experience, I'm going to have a very small soapbox moment, because sometimes there's a stigma surrounding counseling or therapy, and I'm just going to smash that right now. I recommend counseling and or therapy to everyone. It's so beneficial to have a third party who will listen and just let you unload your frustration and fear and uncertainty and try and unpack every cluster of your emotions. That's an incredible thing. And it's been very beneficial to myself and others. Please don't ever be afraid to reach out to someone, because the things that are going on in your life are not worth your life. You're needed here. So my counselor and I talked about comparisons, and he brought up the term, the tape that plays in your head. All that negative self-talk, all those lies that are repeated enough, you think they're true. And for me, that tape went past comparing myself to others, and it went past toxic self-talk, and it led to me being ashamed of who I was. I had no self-worth. I had no self-confidence. It was gone. And my counselor said, you have to replace those lies with truths. Things that you know are true, even if you don't always believe them. In the beginning, when this task was impossibly hard, I carried around index cards with my truths written on them. I had one on my bathroom mirror, one in my wallet, one at my work desk, places that I looked all the time. So even if I didn't say them, even if I didn't believe them, I saw those truths. Every single day, they were still present, fighting against those lies. And the truths have changed over time as I've changed, but there are 4 that I've always kept very close to my heart. I am loved, I am worthy, I am worth it, and I am enough. Since my injury, which is an entirely different talk, I've tried to use comparison to give me hope instead of despair. Carol broke her leg. Look at her now. I have had the support of so many friends who have gone through traumatic injuries, and they've recovered, and so can I. I have no more room for that tape of lies, especially with everything going on in this very strange world. I just don't have the energy to carry around that negativity like I used to. The comparison trap can be a prison. Don't let it wall you in, and don't let it tear you down. You're on your own journey, and there's no way it's going to be the same as anyone else's. And just because someone's struggles may seem larger than yours, it doesn't make yours less difficult or less valid. You are loved. You are worthy. You are worth it. And you are enough.
Our next speaker has been a JC for over a decade and has taught me numerous things and set a great example for me as a JC. But once, when I was a very new JC and I was at my very first lots, he spoke about how you can look at the things that we've done as an organization in the past to help pave your way for the future. And that has stuck with me all these years later. It's affected how I've decided what I want to do with my JC career, how I talk to other people about why they should be JCs. It has affected me so much, and I am so excited for you guys to hear what he has to say today. Everybody put your hands together for Adam Bonerack.
Hello, JCI Michigan. It is an honor to be able to present this speech for all of you today. I think we can all agree that we had hoped it would be under better circumstances. I'm sure we would all like to be celebrating with each other at Boyne Mountain this weekend, but alas, it is what it is. The challenge of COVID-19, however, has presented us with an opportunity to think about our conferences in an entirely new light. Before I begin, I really wish to give a shout out to President Sarah Austin, Training Director Kimmy Tolliver, and especially COO Beth Michaels, along with the rest of the members of the Board of Directors for really coming together and making the best out of what could have been a canceled conference altogether. It is interesting to contemplate the theme of today's JCI Talks, the famous quote, "Comparison is the thief of joy." What does this quote mean, and what lessons can we learn from it? Comparison, or its cousin, the verb compare, like most verbs, is a tool to be used. In and of itself, it is neither good nor bad. It is simply a tool. After all, there are many ways in which comparison can be a good thing. Comparing yourself to one of your mentors or one of your colleagues who is someone you would aspire to be in the future, who has a career path that you would like to model your career path after, can be a useful comparison. Comparing your style of speech to that of a great speaker, somebody like a President Barack Obama, somebody who was known for giving great speeches, can be a great tool in finding a way for us to find tips, tricks, and tools that we can use to make our speech better. You can even think of comparison in a larger context. As the owner of a small company, I can think of comparison when I compare where my company is today with where the company was when it was founded a few years ago, and take great satisfaction at looking at how far we have come. But I can also use comparison to take a look at my company today and compare it to a company who has been in existence a few years longer, and look at what is possible if the team continues to work hard at becoming even greater than we are today. So why then is the quote, "Comparison is the thief of joy," and not instead, "Comparison is the tool to joy"? While researching the history of this quote, it is generally attributed to President Teddy Roosevelt, but this is unconfirmed. I found many fascinating examples of comparison being used in the common language of the day, from phrases like "keeping up with the Joneses," a reference to those people in your circle who always seem to have something a little nicer, a little newer, a little bigger than you. Song lyrics such as Petula Clark's 1967 hit, "The Other Man's Grass is Always Greener," where the sun shines brighter on the other side, and some are lucky and some are not. Mark Twain actually went so far as to say that comparison is the death of joy. Why stop with just being a thief when you can be death itself? The idiom comparing apples to oranges goes back hundreds of years. In fact, references to comparison can be found in the English language all the way back to the 1200s and the 1400s in various languages throughout Europe. That famous bard Shakespeare had perhaps the best reference to comparison. In Much Ado About Nothing, the character Dogberry, the self-satisfied, self-righteous constable, he said that comparisons are odorous. Clearly, the concept of comparison as a tool is not a new one, nor is it a settled one. Just last year, Psychology Today published an article titled fittingly, "Is Comparison Really the Thief of Joy?" In it, the author talks about how the urge to make comparisons is so strong in humans that over 10% of our daily thoughts involve making a comparison of some kind. 10%. Can you imagine? You probably can. In fact, you're probably making comparisons right now, comparing my talk today with those of the other speakers, and comparing all of our talks today with those who have gone before. Comparing my definition of comparison with how you would talk about it or what you think it means. Comparing today's conference with those of past years, when really that is an unfair and an unrealistic expectation. We've never had a virtual conference before, and we've never been faced with a global pandemic and a statewide isolation order happening during one of our conferences. So really, what is the benefit of such a comparison? The variables and the factors that are at play are completely different than any conferences that have gone before, and making such negative comparisons will only lead us down a path of regret about the fact that we're meeting virtually instead of meeting in person. But that also takes away from the fact that we should be celebrating the fact that we are meeting at all, just in a different way. And I don't blame you for making these comparisons. After all, if 10% of our thoughts revolve around comparison, it's only natural. The article further details that our current culture of FOMO only exacerbates the problem, and in my mind, so does social media. Social media is a bubble, and not necessarily a protective one. And if we aren't careful, it is easy to allow social media to lead us down a path of believing that all of our friends are cooler, better, greater, more fun, more successful, more all-around awesome than we are. After all, look at how many parties, events, workshops, clubs, vacations, trips, all of our friends go on while we're stuck at home by ourselves, lonely, because we are not as cool as they are, because we are nothing but a Debbie Downer. And that, right there, is how used in the wrong way, comparison is the thief of joy. As human beings, we have evolved to be very competitive. It is part of our survival instincts. And sometimes this competitiveness comes to light in the worst ways. When we compare our social lives to those of others, instead of comparing ourselves to someone similar to us, we choose instead to compare ourselves to the most highly visible, highly social people we know, the social butterflies of our circles. When we lament about how out of shape we are, we don't compare ourselves to someone of similar age and in a similar background. We compare ourselves to the physical trainer who just completed an Ironman and is 15 years younger than us, or to our third cousin who is competing on American Ninja Warrior. When we complain that we aren't good at speaking in public, we compare ourselves to people who do it professionally for a living every day. As you move forward, remember that to compare is a tool like any others, and used in the right way, comparison can be powerful and effective. But don't allow your sense of comparison to make you feel less than you are, or less capable, or allow you to fail to relish the opportunities and the unique gifts that you have as an individual. Because if you do, then you will be living the saying, comparison is the thief of joy. Thank you.